Hi there and welcome back. In today's video I want to show you another example of how you can use Trimble Creator, the new product that they have, to create something parametric in SketchUp. What I want to do today is basically an example of a parametric massing model, something simple, but I get to cover a few of the principles, and I'm actually going to create this one from scratch. And so, in terms of what you're getting, it's a high-rise extruded rectangle basically, but one that has a slanted top, and the slanted top is determined by a box that is removed from the solid object here through Boolean operations within the setup. Again, this is coming in then as a live component where you can adjust it as needed, and we're going to set it up so that actually this rotation angle in two directions can be adjusted as well. All right, let's get those built in a few moments. Don't forget to check out my book Architectural Design with SketchUp. It covers all of these topics and makes for a great desk reference. You can find it where books are sold. There's also a link to it on my site, sketchupfordesign.com, together with lots of additional tutorials and news. All right, like I said, we're going to start right from scratch. So this is the Trimble Creator website as it loads. If you go to creator.trimble.com, you basically get this. All right. So you saw already in my other video that I kind of like to move things around a little bit. I basically like to switch the screen orientation to side by side. If I do full screen operations just like this, it just makes sense in my mind. And then you can see that the grid is angled on the right. And I also don't like that too much right now. So I'm going to switch that by pressing the C key. And now it's rectangular, and you're basically looking flat down on your grid, and you can do something a little cleaner in my mind. Again, different people do different things. Okay, so for those high rises, what we're going to need first is a box, simple extruded box. And now there's different ways you can do this. I'm going to double click on the grid area here on the right, and I can actually go through the menu here and find things, or I can just search. And I could use box, and if I do that, I get a box, as you can see here on the left. And then, as always, if you hover over that node on the right, you get the inputs and outputs, and the inputs are always really useful. So if you click on this little dot there, you get all the inputs, or settings, if you want to call them that way. And they're really useful in that you can understand what you can do with this thing. So this one has a center and then a scale. So you can scale it either uniformly or differently in the X, Y, and the Z. Now, if I apply a scale here, if I do, enter 2 right there, you see what happens. Of course, it uniformly scales this thing, which is not really what I want. So I am going to not use the box. So on the right, in our grid, whenever you need to delete something, you draw basically a rectangle over it, because simply selecting just highlights, as you can see here, that object, and doesn't let you delete it. So I'm going to have to draw a rectangle over it, hit the delete key, and it's gone. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to use a rectangle right here. So now if I do a rectangle and I go to my properties or inputs, you see there's different things that I can do here. Of course, it also has a center, length, width, that kind of stuff, point columns, basically how many divisions it has, and then the orientation. And then you can also specify what type it is. This is actually really neat, because you can make it a NURB surface, or simply points, or a mesh, or a polyline. And so what you saw by default is it came in as a polyline. You see here kind of the outline. I wish this were a little bit in a different color, but you see it in white on light gray. Okay, so now I'm actually going to switch this to mesh, because I'm going to create this as a mesh and then extrude it as a mesh. And so that makes much more sense. Also, I'm not going to be too specific about the sizes here. I'm going to go with relative scales for this one, because when I pull this component into SketchUp, I can still, you know, change the height and change the scale and so on and so forth. And so I'm going to just go by that. If you care about size, then of course you will want to make sure those numbers make sense over here. Okay, now we got a rectangle, and then again there's two outputs. One is this little dot, which gives you, number outputs of sorts, or data output, which you could then connect to something else. But that's not what we want here. We want to actually use the geometry that we just created. We want to extrude it, and that is done by hovering over this little, tail fin or whatever that is. I don't know. And then you drag it over, and at that point you can create a node. And what's neat about the system is that it already blanks out the nodes that are not possible. So some things make no sense at this point, given the geometry that you just created. So you're nice and limited in what's realistic as a next step. I can again pick from the menu there, or I can type in and extrude in this case, right there. And again, now we can look at the inputs for that, and there's a distance, obviously. And then keep is actually interesting. You can keep only the sides, have basically like an open extrusion, just like this here. As you can see, oops. As you can see right there. Or the caps, that sort of thing. Now, in our case, we want to keep all, because that's what we want to do. All right, so now we've got the extrusion, and that is, of course, something that needs a parameter. So I'm going to create a number parameter somewhere over here. And then I'm going to connect the output of that with the distance of the extrusion. All right. And again, this is now not a geometry parameter connection. This is a value or a data parametric connection. So we need to, use these things as opposed to those fins there. All right, let's go into the number component. There's two things I got to do right now. So for one, it doesn't show up under my parameters. So if I go to the left side of my screen and open parameters, there's nothing there other than this is just the name of or whatever, the hash of the component that I'm creating right now. So that is not useful. But on the right side again in my graph, if I right click on something like this, I have the option to turn something into a parameter. Now if I click parameter, ta-da, there's my number. And then I could, of course, change that like this here. And nothing happens in my view because all I've selected on the right is that number. And remember that what you see on the left in your 3D view is always up to wherever you've selected something. So if I simply select the rectangle and change the number, nothing happens because that happens after the rectangle. But now if I select extrude, I now am pulling in the number parameter. And now, of course, that does something right here. There. So that's in principle how you set up a parameter, and you can turn a bunch of things into parameters simply by, again, right-clicking, setting parameter. So now let's see that this number makes sense. I'm going to go to the input for that, and what I like to do there is, figure something out that makes sense. So minimum could be 0. That should be all right. Maximum we can keep at 10,000. I still need to figure out if it makes sense to set a step value that's not just 0 because of computational efficiencies. Because whenever you change parameters, this thing gets, or the geometry basically gets sent down from the server. And I'm actually really curious if this number here you know, makes things more efficient. Like if I make this 100, if I always use multiples of 100, why not use something like that? That sort of thing. But for now, I'm just gonna, I don't know, just leave it at 10. Could leave it at 0, something like this. And then of course you can set a value. I think the width is 1,000, and then if you want to, you can also give it a default, that sort of thing. And for the most part, we're good here. There's actually something that you can do here too, is like if on the left here, you don't want to show the number, you just want it as a slider. And because everything else is relative anyways, then you can, I got the wrong one, hide input field is what you need here. So then you can hide that. And at that point, you know, you can change the parameter, but it's not based on a real number. So sometimes that makes sense. I'll just leave it like this for now. And then of course, you know, you can hide the slider if you just want to enter numbers, that sort of thing. So all kinds of options right here. Now it says number, and that one is changeable. Oops, let's do it here. Right in the name, you got to zoom in a little bit so that you get this little edit thing. And I'm just gonna call it height. And now that is changed. So we go back to extrude. Now my parameter height does what it's supposed to do. Yay! Okay, that was step 1. So now I have my Highrise, and you can't see it, but I'm doing air quotes here. And now what we need is basically a rotated box up here that I can subtract from this Highrise. And for that, I'm actually going to use a box. I'm just going to put it down here. Box. So now it's actually overlapping there. So let's adjust that a little bit. I'm going to go to my box right here. Oh, actually, I don't have it highlighted here. And I'm going to change the scale a little bit in the X and in the Y. And now I'm going to show you how that looks like by simply highlighting both of those. Now we're overlapping that box over the other one. Okay, so let's fix the box a little bit. I need it actually at the top, so I'm going to move it up here in my graph, and I'm going to take the height output again, the parameter, to also drive the box. And now, of course, I cannot do that directly, because if I look at the inputs that are available, you know, ultimately I need to modify the center, and there's no direct connection. So I'm going to move this box over. I'm going to add an XYZ to vector node, because ultimately the height parameter here is just driving my Z parameter, and then that vector that comes out of there is going to be my center. Ta-da! Now I can highlight both of those. Again, the box and the extrude. And I can play a little bit here, and you'll see what happens. Of course, now it's moving up just like this here. Perfect. So that's the first little bit. Now I've got my 2 pieces of geometry right there. And I'll do the Boolean afterwards. First, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate the box and use 2 parameters for that again. But then afterwards do the Boolean again. Okay, so now I want to rotate this, i.e. I need a number, and make it a parameter, and then go into those values here again. So now this will be an angle ultimately. So my 0 would be the default, so that's okay. Max is way too high. I'm just gonna say 45 degrees is gonna be my max, and step, I don't know, 5 degrees. So again, you could leave this at 0, but if you want to have a little bit more of a, multiple type control, then you can fix it like this here. So now we've got that, and now I'm gonna just go ahead and I gotta zoom in a little bit, get my little pencil right there, and I'm gonna call it rotation 1. I could call it rotation X, of course, that would make much more sense. But in any case, we'll do that. And now I need a second one, because I'm going to rotate it about 2 directions. So there's a little flyout down here that lets me copy and paste nodes. Now, again, I need to properly highlight this node. So I need to do that. I can't just click it. And then I can copy, paste, and place the second one. Now, of course, I got 2 that are labeled the same way. That is not correct. And one I'm going to call 2 right there. And so now just double checking the parameters. Both are going from 0 to 45. That looks like it's correct. And same here. Okay, good. So now we're gonna rotate this box, and that has no parameter right here. So we need to actually transform this box afterwards. So that requires us to take the geometry from the box and create a transformation. And again, like what I did before, I'm gonna drag this little fin and create my transformation, at which point I do get the rotation right here. And rotation is in all 3 directions. So I'm gonna need another XYZ 2 vector node. I can place it right here, where I'm gonna take my first rotation to be the X, second rotation to be the Y, and then all of that pulls into the rotate right here. Okay, fingers crossed. All right, so again, highlight what, up to the point to which you want to have the change occur. So I'm gonna highlight my transformation node, and then I'm gonna go back into my parameters. Now, of course, I see I got all of these things here. So rotation 1 looks right. Rotation 2 looks right, and of course I can combine those just like this here. Beautiful. Okay, there's that. And then height is parametric 2. So we are in business. Okay, good. So now we've got the 2 parts. We've got the high-rise part, the bottom part, and we've got the rotated top, and again, it'll do whatever we tell it to do right here. So now we just got to remove the top from the bottom. And actually, when you're combining geometry, and there's different ways you can doing things. You can do things. If you were to combine these, there's actually there's a collect node and there's a group node that you may want to use. But again, that's not what we want to do here. We want to do a Boolean transformation. So I'm going to do this here. I'm going to drag again my geometry fin out. I'm going to say Boolean 3D geometry. And obviously that party needs 2. So now we've got 2 of those. Okay. And then on there, you can go to the input node and you can pick whatever you want. So union is not what we want to do in this case. Subtraction is what we want to do. And we'll go for reverse subtraction right here. What else? Oh yeah, I got this guy highlighted down here. That's why it still shows up. That's not what I want. There we go. Exactly. So right here, only the last node showing. We've got, let me show you this again. Subtraction can come in 2 parts, of course. You could actually do intersection too. The usual, all of that is available. But I'm going to use the one that works for me, which is cutting out the top from the bottom. And now if I go to parameters and I rotate, I get all of this. Yeah. Now let me zoom in a little bit. This is kind of hard to see, but you see this happening. And just ignore the geometry of this thing right now. It's a little messy at this point. All right, so there's something happening at this point. You saw here welding vertices as part of this process. And what I've learned in the meantime is that you have to clean this up a little bit after this process. If I go to my 3D view on the left here and go to the little wrench, you can turn on wireframe display, and you actually see what's happening behind the scenes there, where everything's triangulated and adjusts and so on and so forth. And that gets quite messy. So that's not what we want. So then from my result that I have on the right here, I need to clean it up. And so then you can unweld vertices. And sometimes you have to re-weld them again. But actually, let me see if that works, because right now unweld gives me this thing, and then weld vertices. I'm going to have to give it a reasonable angle threshold. So I'm still getting my triangles there, but at least the geometry is clean. And let me just quickly double check what happens if I just weld this thing. No, I have to unweld first. Right there. And that might be just good enough. Anyways, experiment with that to see how you get the cleanest geometry, but it's often a combination of those two. In any case, so now we have kind of what we want, right? So now we basically have this thing that is height adjustable, where we can adjust this rotation, and you'll see already that you often run into some boundary conditions where it doesn't work, or it gives you some kind of an interesting accident kind of thing. But you may have to just make the subtraction box bigger to make this work for that. But completely up to you how you want to do this. Yeah, I see here I'm running into it. The same thing on that side as well. But again, any of these here typically require a little bit of error checking, troubleshooting, whether it works the way it's supposed to. So if I want to fix it, for example, I can go back here to my original no, that's the wrong one. Up here to my original box, and maybe give it a scale of 3. And then go back here. Then I get that thing up there. So anyways, adjust as needed, but the basic functionality is right here in this geometry right there. Okay. So now you've got something set up nicely with a bunch of parameters and a bunch of modifiers. We've covered the Boolean operations, which is very useful, and it's actually really nice that this way you can almost program the solid tools into a live component and keep it parametric. In any case, so then same as always, hit save. When it's done saving, you can open this in SketchUp. Left button there, at which point you get this temporary viewer. Okay, so now you see here my geometry isn't overly clean, so I may want to go back actually and do what I did originally, which is weld vertices. Give it the angle threshold. Hit save again. And back to SketchUp. At which point my geometry is clean right there. This is kind of what I want, of course. So that's what I meant. You have to experiment with the cleaning up part as well. Anyways, so my parameters, you can test them one more time here, and then you can hit download. And when you download this, you can, of course, just simply move it into SketchUp, at which point it will come in like this here. And what I did here is I basically created 4 copies that are rotated. So simply with the move tool, I rotate those. Now, like any other, let me just make a single copy. Like any other component, they will remain linked. So when I double click on one of these live components and I adjust the height, then of course I adjust all the copies of that component. So in my case here, that did not make sense, where I wanted to have, I don't know, like a group of high rises, if you want to think of it that way. And then of course, based on some kind of lighting scenario, I want to keep maybe the space in between free. And so then, you adjust the clipping that way. So you'd somehow want these 4 to be independent of each other. And what you got to do then, and I already did it here, so it's not going to be highlighted, but after you make those 4 those copies, you have to make these components each unique. So you have to make unique on every single one of these 4 copies. So now, of course, if I try that on all of those, make unique is grayed out because they are all unique. And then when they're unique, you can actually adjust parameters separately. So if I double click each one of these, I can now go ahead and adjust any of these parameters that I've set earlier as much as I want. And then I can go to the next one and do the same. Now, apparently there's a little glitch right now. So if I highlight the next one, my original one still works that way. So that seems to be something that will be fixed soon. But if you close that dialog and double click on the next one, then you're fine. Then this works. And again, close the dialog, go to the next one. And I mean, you can do interesting things here. You can even have like this kind of stuff happening where it folds into the ground and so on and so forth. So there's some really cool possibilities here in terms of parametric massing. And as you saw, it's a very simple model that we created in Creator right here. But it can be expanded in any which way you like, of course. And of course, this can all be curved shapes and so on. You saw already that there's a bunch of possibility in Creator right there. Okay, I hope this was useful. And again, this whole thing is in beta, so there's all kinds of things that can happen. And I encourage you, of course, to give feedback and discuss any of these live components and the Creator beta in the forums. The link is right there on the Creator website. And I hope you're having fun with this and you're creating something cool based on all of this here. All right, good luck, all the best, see you soon.